just clarify this position. If you look at the medical literature, I don't see any evidence that carbohydrates makes people metabolically unwell. And I will...
Okay, so if you aren't part of the carnivore community, you might not know who Paul Salidino is, but he's one of the original guys of carnivore who wrote the book about carnivore and then stopped being carnivore and said you didn't have to be carnivore anymore. And he talks about how things improved when he started eating fruit and honey. And that's big no-no in the carnivore because they basically see fruit as nothing but sugar. I think the thing about Paul Salidino is, and I really like him, and he's really, like, you should listen to him because he has no problem saying when he thinks he's been wrong, and he has no problem adjusting as he goes along and being ridiculed for changing his mind. So I think that's a really good thing to have in a doctor and a scientist, somebody who can admit, okay, I think I got it wrong here. But also, the thing about it is when I listen to him, he does a huge amounts of exercise. Like he has very, very physical life. He does a lot of, I think it's like surfing or windsurfing or something. He lives half his time in Costa Rica. He's always in the sea or on the beach. So for him, carbohydrates, and especially after being in long-term ketosis for years and fixing his metabolism and then reintroducing a lot of carbohydrates into his diet, of course, it's going to have a completely different effect on him than it's going to have on people who are metabolically unhealthy. So again, there are studies to show that there are tribes that ate 70, 80% plants and they were fine metabolically, but that's because they were living in the middle of nowhere where they were not exposed to the toxins that we're exposed to, and they never had an ultra-processed food in their life because ultra-processed foods don't exist. So the plants that they were having were organic, grown, like they're basically still living like foragers. Like that's a completely different thing to people living in the modern world who are eating toxicity all the time. And Paul Saladino is very much about, if you see him when he's making food, it's all about wooding, chopping boards, and like he would never use anything non-stick. He's been kind of about that for a long time, that like you want to get these microplastics away from you and things like that. So there's a load of different factors into what he's doing. And I don't think that some of what he's been saying recently applies to the average person on the street, because the average person on the street is being slowly poisoned their entire life. So to compare that to, a tribe that was found in South America, someplace that eats 70% plants, like that has very little, had never really had any contact with the modern world. Like, it's just not the same. You're comparing apples and oranges there. But anyway, let's see. I haven't seen this. Let's see what he says about why keto is not the way for insulin resistance. Because this is like how to reverse insulin resistance, not keto. Probably clickbait, because you can certainly reverse insulin resistance by cutting out carbohydrates and stopping your constant spikes of blood glucose over the day that makes you insulin resistant. But let's see what he has to say.
Respectfully debate anyone in the ketogenic community about that. So to say that carbohydrates cause insulin resistance, no, I don't see that in the literature at all. It doesn't happen. Fruit, apples, bananas, oranges, milk, honey, they don't make people obese and diabetic. However, once you are broken, and I believe honestly that inappropriate consumption of seed oils and probably processed foods in general with a number of ingredients that kind of break metabolism and cause increased levels of lipopolysaccharide from the gut to transit into the human body, this is that's at the epicenter of what's causing with metabolic dysfunctions.
Yeah, he's really one of these seed oils is the root cause of everything, because as soon as we started putting seed oils into food is when you see the spike in all of these things, from obesity to dementia and everything else. And seed oils, I wouldn't touch a seed oil. Like, I really don't want anything to do with them. I think that there are some nutritionists who say there's nothing wrong with seed oil and that there's no proof, but I think that I wouldn't go near them. I use animal fat. So he is acknowledging here that if you're metabolically unhealthy, carbohydrates are going to have a different effect on you. So, okay, I'm happy about that. So this is kind of clickbaity. because the easiest way to fix your insulin resistance is to basically go carnivore, and that's the quickest way to do it. So I don't know what he's like, I don't know
So
what he's saying.
it's breaking the mitochondria at the level of the membrane because you're eating excess linoleic acid, which accumulates in the mitochondrial membrane, breaks the electron transport chain, and or often co-occurring, you're eating foods that are irritating the gut, causing dysbiosis, leading to overgrowth of the wrong type of bacteria, and leading to endotoxemia or elevated levels of lipopolysaccharide in the human body. We know that lipopolysaccharide is horrible for glycolytic oxidative phosphorylation metabolism. Fruit, honey, no, I don't see it. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. That's not what caused it. The problem is that if you look at people who are metabolically unwell, you're raising your eyebrows. We'll see if you disagree with me. The problem is that if you look at people who are metabolically unwell, they don't handle the fruit and honey as well, meaning they get more blood sugar spikes. And so, yeah, they should.
Okay, good. So he is actually like, no, yeah. So he is saying what I'm saying, like it's completely different if you're metabolically unhealthy. Okay. I mean, we know that humans have always eaten fruit, just they've eaten fruit at like one particular time of year. They didn't eat it all year round. So even if you were going with a paleo diet, you probably would have eaten some fruit at some point during the year.
Probably limit those things. Completely eliminating those things, I think, is a bad idea. And I'm not saying a diabetic person needs to eat honey, but there are at least 1 or 2 randomized controlled trials with up to 150 grams of honey per day in diabetics showing improved insulin
trehalose and all that's pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, improved insulin sensitivity. Improved insulin sensitivity. Now, blood sugar goes up a little bit, but not much. But I don't think a diabetic is going to, have a horrible time if they have 1 tablespoon of honey per day. My concern is that it's good for people to limit carbohydrates to some extent when they are metabolically unwell. But I think if you limit them too much and you're not paying attention to things like a full thyroid panel, cortisol, glucagon, epinephrine, you'll see the stress hormones start to go up on the other side, right? And this is my learning from my experiences, my evolution, my missteps that I share with people. Like for me, going strict carnivore after a year and a half, that was probably the worst I've been metabolically because I was really not doing that good. My electrolytes were kind of messed up from not having an insulin bump.
Okay, I kind of spaced out, so I want to listen to that again.
Not paying attention to things like a full thyroid panel, cortisol, glucagon, epinephrine, you'll see the stress hormones start to go up on the other side, right? And this is my learning from my experiences, my evolution, my missteps that I share with people. Like for me, going strict carnivore after a year and a half, that was probably the worst I've been metabolically because...
Okay, strict carnivore for a year and a half. So, yeah, I look at, this is his experience. I don't know. Let's hear what he says.
I was really not doing that good. My electrolytes were kind of messed up from not having an insulin bump when I eat, which helps you hold on to electrolytes, sodium, potassium, chloride, calcium.
Oh, that's interesting. So I do think that people go a bit crazy with the whole insulin spike thing because, for example, yesterday I ate a kiwi after my meat and avocado dinner. So I had 2 avocados and I had meat, and then I ate a kiwi. And I went and tested about an hour afterwards, and my blood sugar had spiked to the level on the Keto Mojo that says concern, but actually would be in the typical range of the highest that you should get your blood sugar before it starts getting dangerous. And I was still in ketosis. So it's completely, and I think this is what some people push back on about the carnivore and keto community, is that it's actually normal to have a blood sugar spike after you eat. You want it, it's necessary. It's having 5 or 6 blood sugar spikes throughout the day for years and years that's going to fuck up your body. But having like 1 because you eat a piece of fruit. I will say that when I eat my bell peppers and my cucumber and stuff, there is no blood sugar spike. My blood sugar goes up, but it doesn't spike that way. When I eat fruit, it does spike. So people have different reactions to things, but you actually need a blood sugar spike. It's part of the process. You just don't need 5 of them a day.
Magnesium, whatever. And so when I added back carbohydrates, I felt much better. My fasting blood sugar is lower eating 300 grams of carbohydrates.
Yeah, listen, sweetheart, that's because you're constantly active. Like most people wouldn't probably exercise the same amount as you, of course you're going to burn. That's like comparing me to an ultra marathon runner, like, me who does maybe, who goes out for a jog, maybe 4 times or 3 or 4 times a week at, 20, 30 minutes a time. Like, you can't compare my metabolism to an ultra marathon runner,
Right? My fasting blood sugar is lower than it was on carnivore. My fasting insulin is the same or lower.
Yeah.
So this is something to consider. You're overweight and obese, which is a lot of people. Fruit didn't get you there.
Yeah.
Limiting it somewhat is not the worst idea, but fruit didn't get you there. Fruit didn't cause it. If you just tell people that carbohydrates are what cause diabetes because you misinterpret the literature and the physiology is misunderstood, then people won't potentially address the other problems, fix the gut, make sure you're not eating foods that are irritating your gut, causing lipopolysaccharide to move into the body. And that's probably the hardest thing to address because it's not something you can really measure easily, and make sure you get rid of the seed oils. So did I answer your question there? I think that there is room for moderation in disease states, but understand that those foods didn't get you there. And that's something that's really, really important because people need to know how to get back.
Yeah, I think that's a fair enough point, because we do tend to demonize certain things. And really, what you should be doing is getting away from the toxins as much as possible. And yeah, I'm going extreme. I'm going into ketogenic therapy thing, but I don't know if I will need to be on keto, in nutritional ketosis for the rest of my life. I don't know. But I do know that I want to stay the hell away from non-stick frying pans, and I want to stop buying skincare and, female products with all of these things that disrupt my hormones. And I do know that I want to eat, as best quality food as I possibly can. If that's vegetables or fruit or meat, it doesn't matter. And I do know that I want to stay the hell away from any refined sugars, refined flours, and seed oils. Again, it's really about what you cut out in terms of the modern world rather than and the modern food system.
Back. And as I said, if you limit the carbohydrates too much, you end up with a stress response, and that works in the other direction. You end up people who sometimes do good for a little while on keto, but plateau. Yeah. And then they end up in this kind of hole they can't get out because they have so much carbohydrate fearing. And I've worked with people like this. I've seen it. They have such bad electrolyte issues. They have sleep issues, palpitations, sex hormones are declining. They're clearly stressed from this lack of carbohydrates, and they don't know what to do because they realize they got somewhat healthier by limiting carbohydrates, probably cutting junk food out of their diet, and they don't want to go back there, and then they're stuck. And I think that there is a way forward, which is a little more informed by consideration of human physiology and where we've come from as humans. I believe that the two...
I wonder, could it be that we evolved to eat more at some times of the year, less at other times of the year, certain foods at other times of the year? And maybe it's just like, you go into your nutritional ketosis for some part of the year, and then maybe like a month or 6 weeks of the year, you kind of just add a bit more of the fruit and stuff back into your diet. And then, maybe but the thing about it is you then need a lot of self-control not to let that fruit turn into, bread and stuff.
Three key things that break energy production, right? You have macronutrients moving them through the electron transport chain in the mitochondria. It all happens there. Are excess linoleic acid from seed oils and lipopolysaccharide from a disordered gut. And I'll just talk about each of those briefly so people really understand what they do. Seed oils are corn, canola, safflower, sunflower, soybean, grapeseed, etc. Evolutionarily inconsistent amounts of linoleic acid are being consumed by humans today, things we never would have had. That linoleic acid and other polyunsaturated fats get stuck in our membranes because we don't metabolize them as humans easily. Some we do, those specifically we don't metabolize. We don't get rid of them. And that there's evidence. I mean, again, you can't do randomized controlled trials on this. You have to look at cell culture. You have to look at in vitro studies. But the more polyunsaturated fats there are in the mitochondrial membrane, the more proton leak there is across the inner mitochondrial space and the matrix. And that gradient is our battery. That is our cellular battery. And if you break that battery, if you break that difference in charge, you don't make energy as well. And we know that the changing structure of the mitochondrial membrane, the cristae, the folds in the mitochondrial membrane get broken when we have excess amounts of these fatty acids. And so putting foods in our body that we have not had access to for hundreds of thousands of years as humans this is a very compelling hypothesis that I think is supported by the randomized controlled trials looking at polyunsaturated fats that breaks energy metabolism. Lipopolysaccharide, what foods do we eat that damage the gut? Those are the foods that cause overgrowth, predominantly of gram-negative bacteria, but there are other types of lipopolysaccharides, even from gram-positive bacteria, but overgrowth of the wrong type of bacteria leads to LPS in the human body. And those studies are so clear. It's just crystal clear that when you have a messed up gut, your energy metabolism is going to be broken. And then another one is glyphosate, which also appears to disorder mitochondrial respiration in vitro because these are hard to do RCTs. So some people will poo-poo mechanistic studies, but that's where we get the hypotheses from. We have to do these mechanistic studies to understand these things. And I'll just make one comment about LPS and saturated fat. If you look at LPS and saturated fat, I think this has been massively misunderstood. People will say, oh, well, if you eat more saturated fat, the LPS moves across your gut more. But it moves across your gut more because it's being taken in saturated fat lipid rafts to the liver to be detoxified. So saturated fat is protective against LPS. And mono and polyunsaturated fats are harmful with regard to lipopolysaccharide. But if you really look at literature carefully, LPS, you are protected against that by saturated fat. So I would say
Yeah. So I'm not going to pretend that I knew a lot about what in the name of God he was just talking about there, but definitely check out his channel. And this is Tom Lauder as well. So I've made a video about him talking about fasting mistakes I think he made. And yeah, they're both really, really good channels. They've both got some really great information on them if you're into this kind of nutrition, ketosis, carnivore, keto, metabolic psychiatry, metabolic therapy, if you've got insulin resistance or obesity or any of those kind of things.
Beginning part, fix your diet.
And yeah, and obviously if you can like, subscribe, comment, let me know what you think, because we're really, trying to get the information out there that there are other ways of